Hey super friends, my name is Neil and welcome to this episode 93 of the Get Your Comic Con podcast. We're here pretty much twice a week right now to bring you a slice of film, TV and pop culture goodness from our studio direct to your listening device. I am going to chat to you this episode about a TV show which just dropped its third episode of its most recent season on Paramount Plus. It stars Anson Mount, Rebecca Romijn, Ethan Peck, and a wonderful ensemble cast who are venturing to weird original planets. Let's go weird original planets. Yes, I am going to be talking about Season 2 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which is currently rolling out new episodes every Thursday in both the US and the UK on Paramount Plus. The series also stars Jess Bush, Christina Chong, Celia Rose Gooding, Melissa Navia, Babs Alunsamakun, and Season 1, Bruce Horak, who you may see again in Season 2 as Hema, and this season adds the absolutely wonderful Carol Kane as Pelia. I really wanted to call her Kate Kane, which is why I had to think there for a second. So I have seen 6 episodes of Season 2 of Strange New Worlds so far. As I am recording this podcast, episode 3, which is called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, is about to drop on Paramount Plus. So we will touch a little bit spoilery on the first 3 episodes. The rest I'm going to keep completely secret. So just to say that I have not seen the crossover episode with Star Trek Lower Decks. That is episode 7 of the brand new season. I have seen episodes 1 to 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10 still elude me. You can also read my review over on our website, which is www.getyourcomiccon.co.uk. So I think that there is absolutely no avoiding the fact that 2023 has already been a huge year for Star Trek. So we kicked off the year with the award-worthy final season of Star Trek Picard, which you have heard me talk about absolutely at length. You can see my cast interviews over on YouTube. You can listen to our podcast about it. You can read my reviews. It was just brilliant. Absolutely 5-star brilliance. So now it's time for the return of Strange New Worlds. This is easily the best reviewed of the contemporary Trek shows and probably the most warmly received by fans up until the 3rd season of Picard. But there's always that concern that a second season isn't going to live up to the brilliance of the first season. And I'm very, very happy to say that I think for the most part, Season 2 of Strange New Worlds is very, very solid. It's almost just a continuation. You could watch Season 1 and 2 back to back and you almost wouldn't know the difference from one to the other than seeing the cast feeling more comfortable in their roles and the writers being braver in some of the stories that they're telling. So I think it's worth noting that Season 2 was around halfway through production when the first season debuted in North America. So for those of you listening in the UK, you'll know we were several months behind because Paramount Plus didn't debut here until later, and that first season had already wrapped airing, I think, in the US by the time we saw it. But in terms of where the cast and the crew were in production, they were around halfway through shooting Season 2 when Season 1 first aired. So this batch of new episodes that I've watched were written and produced before the production team had even an inkling as to what the general public would be thinking of this sassy take on the pre-Kirk days of NCC 1701. In interviews for the second season, if you have watched any or listened to any interviews that the cast and crew have done, they've all talked about this season taking bigger swings and pushing even harder. And whilst that is sometimes the case, not all of these first 6 episodes that I've watched are pushing the Trek envelope quite as much as maybe you would expect given how it's been talked about. The season premiere, Broken Circle, which is available to stream now, drops us back in with this really high-octane adventure that scales up the action. The Klingons are back, and they now have been adjusted in look to be sort of a hybrid between the original series and Next Generation days, scrapping that really heavily stylized look that was seen in Discovery when that was first on the air. With forces manipulating both the Federation and the Klingons back towards war, the crew of the Enterprise sans Captain Pike because Anson Mount is missing for much of this episode. He's off dealing with the events of episode 2. So they must catch up with Lieutenant Lan Ninian Singh, played by Chrissy Chong, who had left the Enterprise in episode 9 of the previous season. She now is folded back into the story. So the Broken Circle really puts Ethan Peck as Spock in the captain's chair and poses some meta questions about taking command. And it also puts a wonderfully bright spotlight on Dr. Mbenga and Nurse Chapel, who get some incredible action sequences in this episode. If you've had a chance to see it, it's kind of pushing the bar a little bit for Star Trek, but it is so wonderful to watch, and it's great to see the two actors who clearly have a great bond performing those scenes. There's something about this episode which really does... first of all, it's a perfect signifier to what to expect from Season 2, not tonally, but its approach to the really exquisite ensemble cast. But what I wanted to say was I also think that this episode is leaning in more to the J.J. Abrams style of Star Trek than perhaps we saw in Season 1. That sense of adventure and sense of action is much more heightened in a kind of Hollywood big screen style in this episode. And it's great. It's nice to see them playing with genre. It's something that we know they did a lot in Season 1, so it's cool to see right off the bat that they're still doing that with Season 2, and it's interesting to see them play a little bit more with that action-adventure style, and I think for the most part it works. But across the 6 episodes that I have watched, it's really clear that the senior staff of the Enterprise are all given far more moments to shine. There's no denying the star power of Anson Mount, Rebecca Romaine, or Ethan Peck, but what's amazing as a fan of the ensemble is to see, Christina Chong, Melissa Navia, and Jess Bush, who I've just kind of mentioned, having a lot more to do. I have to say, though, hands down, the MVP of the 6 episodes, again, that I have seen, is Celia Rose Gooding as Uhura. The character absolutely takes a central focus in the 6th episode, which is called Lost in Translation, and is certainly it's not an outright horror episode, but it is very, I guess, horror tinged. It has a lot of horror influences, and that episode picks up the pieces of Uhura's relationship with Hema, played by Bruce Horak, who unfortunately, was killed off in Season 1, but they did say that the actor would return for Season 2, and there are some nice nods to the relationship that the two had built back in Season 1, and that episode delights in thrilling the audience with a tease of her future relationships with certain characters who are recurring in the 2nd season. But I want to touch on a new character who's joining in Season 2, and that's Carol Kane as the incredibly offbeat and quirky new engineer of the USS Enterprise, Pelia. She has a very mysterious past which is laid out pretty slavishly in the 1st episode. It's almost as mysterious as her accent, which does take a while to get used to, and it ties into the time-travelling Toronto-based 3rd episode of the season that drops this week on Paramount Plus, which is called Tomorrow, Tomorrow, and Tomorrow. Kane is, I think, only going to be a recurring character in Season 2. She's not in every single one of the episodes that I saw, and thus far that means I haven't spent too much time getting acquainted with her, but in that kind of grand old tradition of the quirky Neelix-style character, she's definitely going to be one that fans will take a while to warm up to, or will instantly kind of fall in love with her. You're either going to love her right off the bat, or it is going to take a bit of time to get used to her. But she's absolutely brilliant. I believe this is a brand new race that they're introducing, or at least is a race that we've never really seen or spent much time with before, and there's a lot of explanation. There's a bit of discussion around it in episode 1, and then there is a lot more discussion around it in episode 3, and it ties back to a few nice... There's some good full circle moments across these 6 episodes. And I mean, that's part of the joy of watching Strange New Worlds in general. In Season 1, it was so playful in its approach to genre, and Season 2 is charmingly more of the same of that. You've got the courtroom drama that we saw in last week's Ad Astra Per Aspera, and that digs right to the heart of Trek's approach to tackling those everyday human condition stories. Then there's the classic abandoned crewman who ends up taking over and becoming ruler of his own planet in episode 4, which is called Among the Lotus Eaters, and that one will be premiering next week. And then it dips its toe back into sitcom territory. There is an episode which is very much in the vein of Spock Amok from last season, which was a kind of a Marmite episode for a lot of fans. Again, it's a Spock-centric tale. This time it's called Charades, and it certainly tests the boundaries of how far Spock can be pushed into comedy territory, but also how much Ethan Peck is able to do with the character and his performance. There are some interesting guest stars in that episode, which will delight some continuity fans and also fans of this contemporary Trek universe. but it's like Spock and Mock. It's going to be an episode that some people will really enjoy for its experimentation and it pushing itself into some sort of some sillier territory, whereas others will really struggle to kind of suspend their feelings on Trek lore and Trek history, and will feel like it probably goes too far. Funnily enough, I think there are a lot of people who complain that maybe Ethan Peck's version of Spock is a little bit too emotional, and that's something which is an undercurrent in this season. It's picked up on in the first episode, it's picked up on in Charades. It's something that exists that I feel is going to be Season 2's equivalent of Pike's storyline of dealing with his fate that we saw him kind of grappling with right across Season 1. So it would not surprise me if that's going to be something that rears its head again towards the end of the season and is maybe resolved in the Season 2 finale, leading us into a Season 3 where this Spock is similar to how we find him played by Leonard Nimoy in the original series. As I'm going to presume every reviewer has probably pointed out at this point, and I have mentioned screeners for Season 2 did not include the anticipated crossover with Lower Decks, but what we did see was more than enough for me to be able to say that the production values on Strange New Worlds are still outstanding. The use of the AR wall technology to immerse the cast in these alien landscapes is just amazing. There's so much of it in every single episode, from the backdrop of the engineering department on the Enterprise to the planet seen in Broken Circle and in other episodes. Particularly next week's episode 4 is very heavy in terms of that, and for backdrops as well. Whether they're aboard another vessel or beaming down to a planet, the set design itself, the practical set design and the overall production design is just absolutely stellar and awards worthy, just as Picard was. Every environment in this season, if you sit there and you freeze frame it, it's so rich with small detail. And whilst the Enterprise itself remains a kind of warm and comforting environment for the crew to inhabit, a lot of time is spent in this new 10 forward style lounge, and it really offers some great opportunities to soften the sometimes sharp edges of the vessel. And there are some great character moments in there, particularly in later episodes. So episode 6, for instance, has a wonderful moment right at the end of the episode, the very, very last shot of the episode, which is in that set, and it's cool to see them spend time there. If only we're going to get to a moment where someone picks up a trombone or recites poetry. We shall wait and see. The visual effects obviously are completely top notch. The scenes set in the colder space are really richly coloured and never short of dynamic. There are times where the ships do look a little fake, but it's just the way that I think if you were new to Star Trek and watching this, you would find it spectacular. But for those of us who've grown up with, from my generation, the Next Generation and Deep Space Nine and Voyager, you remember those days when they still used practical model ships rather than CGI models, and so there is still something that will twig in the back of your brain and say, well, this is a CGI ship now. It's doing so much more on screen that they just couldn't do with a model, but you kind of miss some of the way that the light would reflect off those models, whereas now, it's obviously computer generated, but I think it still looks absolutely outstanding. So my verdict on Strange New Worlds in my written review over on the website was that the series seeks to impress with an incredibly solid run of episodes to kick off Season 2. A stronger focus on the ensemble cast has opened up the show to even more possibilities and is even more enjoyable because of it. I can't pick a favourite episode from these 6 because they were all really, really, they're all great. If you held a phaser to my head, then I would probably say the 6th episode, the horror-esque Lost in Translation, is one of my favourite, is probably my favourite, followed by Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, because I think what that did was some really interesting stuff with Trek lore, tying the eugenics wars to the temporal wars and things that we've seen in other versions of Star Trek. It's interesting to see all become connected in sometimes subtle, sometimes less subtle ways. I would love to know what you're thinking of Season 2 of Strange New Worlds so far. If you've watched episodes 1 and 2, or if you're listening to this after the 3rd episode has dropped, what did you think of this week's time travel adventure for La'an and Paul Wesley as Jim Kirk, who returns for the first time this season? You can find me on social media at Neil Vag, that's NeilVagg, and you can find us on social media at Get Your Comic Con all major platforms. As you can tell, I'm starting to lose my voice, so that seems like a good place to cut off. I will be back early next week with a brand new episode discussing the upcoming animated series My Adventures with Superman, which is premiering in the States on July the 6th and is a very exciting new prospect for the Man of Steel. So I will be back to chat about that very soon. And in the meantime, we continue to make plans for San Diego Comic-Con. We are really only a few weeks away now from heading out to the States. So there is a lot to do. I'm going to leave it there. Stay safe, stay well, and I will speak to you very, very soon. Bye.